Campers, it's me, Ari Lehman, the first Jason Voorhees. From Friday the 13th, I'm here with AJ, and he's got the juiciest slice ready for you. It's dripping with blood. Jason never dies. Nobody's ever come back alive.
Salutations, all.
What the hell do you want?
Me? I want to talk about an Italian jungle cannibal flick that went with the most obvious and gratuitous title they could think up, which is usually more of a sales tactic than a guarantee. But don't let that deter you here, because in this instance, it's indeed a warning. The unluckiest will, in fact, wind up eaten alive.
Yeah.
Less a mondo, so no pretense of being a shockumentary, and more in the tradition of adventure action flicks, it still brings the goods these films promise.
Well, I'm sincerely glad to hear that, for all our sakes.
The important thing is we find out the answer to the question.
Where's Diana Morris? Come on!
So, what do you get when you throw cannibalistic natives, a dire cause, and heavy-duty gory violence in a blender and hit puree? In recent years, you get Eli Roth's love letter to the jungle cannibal subgenre, the Green Inferno. But if you look back to the year backdoor political shenanigans signaled the death knell of the American middle class, John Lennon was assassinated by a catcher-in-the-rye-loving weirdo, and the U.S. boycotted the Summer Olympics in protest of Russia invading Afghanistan, you get the intense doomed to die, aka eaten alive. Don't forget the exclamation point. Thanks for checking this out. I deeply appreciate it. If anything about it trips your fancy, please like, subscribe, and share.
Yes.
Written and directed by the legendary Umberto Lenzi, who inadvertently kicked off the whole jungle cannibal subgenre boom with The Man from Deep River, and would after this film put a stamp on it with Cannibal Fur Rocks. Produced by the prolific Luciano Martino, the film stars the one and only Robert Kerman.
Look, I don't give a damn if you're an American, too. Your problems are not my problem.
I wonder how his mainstream career would have sussed out had he never participated in the adult industry.
Curiosity killed a cat.
As rough and ready jungle guide Mark Butler, the exquisite Janet Agron, as determined Southern belle Sheila,
I see how you can make a weak man stupid.
Thank you.
the man from Deep River himself, the legendary Ivan Razumov, as cult leader and Jim Jones stand-in Jonas Melvin.
Nerd alert!
The name Melvin brings only one thing to mind. Yes, I do have ADHD. Don't even get me started on squirrels. Anyhow, lovely actress Paula Centauri,
That's Diana, all right.
as doomed Diana Morris, fencing maestro Franco Fantasia, as the cobra-wielding Reeves, the ridiculously underutilized Mimi Lai,
His truth is marching on.
as Widow Mawara. He wanted to remain uncredited, but IMDb lets very few escape. Carlo Longhi as
My name is Dick. I'm one of Jonas's followers.
a guy who definitely had the right look and energy to play a baddie, Franco Conduti, as brutal and sadistic Karen, Jonas's lead henchman, and the indelible mainstay who's probably more respectable than the material warranted, Mel Furr,
How odd. How very odd.
as Professor Carter. And yes, he was also in Tobe Hooper's 1976 killer crocodile classic, Eaten Alive.
If it's not one of those two, I'm afraid I'm lost.
The film kicks off with an assassination at Niagara Falls. The majority of proceedings take place in the jungles of New Guinea, so naturally the next stop is in New York City for elimination number 2. The assassin flees, very gracefully. Clearly there's an agenda at play as a man rushing through the city also gets the dart.
Joy of giving with 9,000 homeless. What the hell?
This time the blowgun aficionado's gracefulness doesn't save him. what you will about Italian cinema, but that preamble anteed up 4 exits before the audience's butts could even warm up their theater seats. The police have summoned Sheila about a matter very important to her.
Something happened to Diana. I didn't quite get it straight on the phone.
Well, when was the last time you had news of your sister?
They explained that the assassin of the 3 men was found with an 8mm color film in his possession and...
Diana Morris, 14A West Street, printed on the box.
Diana, as it turns out, is a bit of a flake and involved herself not only with some oddballs, but the type who throw away everything at the whim of a self-styled spiritual leader.
Do they have a guy called Jonas?
No, who is he?
Good question.
A first-class nut. A dope addict, probably.
Drug, sure, but what else?
He used to preach down in the village. That mankind should go back to nature. Birds and the bees. You know, save your soul with nature a bit.
I think he's getting the talk mixed up with a nature-oriented hippie commune.
Wherever your sister is, she's mixed up in this business.
Oh, that would stand to reason.
Are you sure she didn't write to you or anything?
No, like I said, she made herself pretty scarce. We never saw each other.
This isn't romancing the stone. Her sister didn't mail her any maps. Sheila goes straight to Professor Carter because he has insight into where the footage on the reel recovered from the assassin was filmed.
Could be a fakir gathering in Borneo, or a ceremony of the purification sect of New Guinea.
The footage includes some heavy tribal rituals, including piercings and hooks, what I would refer to as the alternative.
You mean insane?
She at least asked the right question.
Purification sect, but what is that exactly?
The professor is in his wheelhouse.
An ancient ritual society that uses pain to reunite man with nature.
And as he explains, not all of it is contrary to what many believe.
They're against the contamination of land and resources.
Only they take their beliefs too far.
Very, very fanatical in their beliefs. Their major enemy is civilization, in the Western sense of the word.
Outside all that she knows, the whole thing mystifies Sheila.
How can my sister possibly be involved in a...
What the professor says next is quite sobering.
Well, they supposedly have members all over the world, even in these United States.
To get confirmation about his suspicions, the professor takes Sheila to meet with someone who might know Jonas.
Don't even mention that pig's name. Look what he did to me.
Turns out she has
He's a lunatic. Out of his cotton-picking head.
a whole lot to say about Jonas and his methods.
All that baloney about the purification sect was just a way to turn those idiots into his slaves.
And she draws out a compelling picture
He's gotta hurt people. He gets high on pain.
of a hypocritical man.
His religion, yeah. He is his religion. You know, like third-degree burns, honey?
Who manipulates people to do his bidding.
That goddamn louse ripped off every cent they had before dragging them to his utopian, unpolluted world down in
And reveals where his lair can be found.
Merauke, or whatever the hell that place is called in New Guinea.
Before an interested bystander swoops in
Keep your mouth shut and get out of here. Mind your own damn business.
and silences her with an old school pimp slap. The professor and Sheila rather coldly take his advice and vamoose right out of there. Witnessing him win a primitive and brutal form of arm wrestling, she doesn't approve, but she doesn't exactly disapprove either. Sheila knows she's found her man.
Look, lady, this part of the world is known for 2 things. Crazy religions and a clap.
To lead her into the cobra-infested jungle.
All right, you're in trouble. 7 years ago, you deserted from Vietnam. I know all about it, so relax, okay?
All about attitude, he makes it clear he doesn't need nor want to get caught up in her malarkey.
Look, I appreciate the offer. Nice meeting you. Have a very pleasant rest of your life. Bye-bye.
Her plea falls on the kind of ears that aren't deaf, just stuffed with a lot of cotton wadding.
Mark, I'm counting on you. You're the only one who can help me.
Look, you have to resist.
Sheila next attempts to appeal to his entrepreneurial nature.
I will offer you good money if you take me to Shakir.
You're nuts.
When that doesn't work, she attacks his pride, baby.
scared, huh?
But Mark didn't come off the assembly line yesterday, and, keeping his ego far abreast of this situation, won't be suckered.
All right.
Our dear lady does still possess the means to capture his attention.
Hey, wait a minute.
That doesn't change that it will be on his terms.
I only work for cash.
A little helicopter small talk.
The other day I went up to my girlfriend. I said, you know, I'd like a little pussy. She said, me too. Mine's as big as a house.
Wrong jungle, wrong movie. Who's queuing up these clips?
What's a rich girl like you doing in a shit place like Alabama?
Oh, watch poor niggers break their asses in my father's cotton mill.
Hey, went with the hard R.
Okay, back on track. Now we know Sheila and Diana come from old money, of the cracker variety.
I apologize for nothing.
After they ditched the woman who sold out Jonas, I had a suspicion Sheila was at least a little unprincipled. Mark has a singular concern.
I like whiskey.
If hot lead counts, they get a warm reception when they reach their destination.
One thing you learn in Vietnam is to keep down.
Get down. Shut up.
Reeves is the kind of paranoid kook that gives paranoid kooks a bad name.
Who are you? What do you want?
Not to mention he's a thief.
Please watch.
And quick to lock people up.
That watch belonged to my sister, I'm positive.
Yes, okay. So that only confirms that she was here, right?
Mark attempts to allay any possible worries.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that
They killed her, is that what you're trying to say?
Is your sister rich?
She had better be rich.
3 years ago, when my father died, we inherited the cotton mill. I was still underage, so my sister took over the legal administration.
A man more prone to find problems than solutions. And having followed her malarkey as far as he'd like to, Mark isn't having it.
This is bad business, lady. Bad business.
Look, I don't expect you to get involved in this out of sheer pity.
Sheila throws around a rich woman's weight.
I'll lay on another $80,000 if you'll help me to find Diana.
Another 80,000, huh?
And he makes sure of one thing.
That's dead or alive.
Then there's some business with a cobra.
What's that?
It's one unhappy serpent.
Don't move.
Luckily, Mark knows how to deal. Or does he? Reeves returns and finds his venomous pop-up trick did, well, the trick. All he needs to do now is find the snake. Tough guy act and cobra stratagem backfiring on him big time, Reeves finds himself at the mercy of an agitated Mark.
Now I'm gonna show you I mean business too.
Who has no qualms against laying down the law and getting rough.
Don't know, huh?
I don't know anything about her.
Come on, I'm gonna break every bone in your body. Now where is she?
Enough to ensure compliance.
No, stop. Stop. Diana Morris is alive.
Talk turns to the man at the center of all this.
Jonas decided to build his purification village in the middle of the jungle, where no white man could possibly find him.
And Mark makes arrangements for their journey.
I give you $1. You give me a canoe, 2 guides, native supplies, anything I need. And this, of course, understand?
They canoe upriver with a pair of native guides, and that night Mark attempts to smooth relations with Sheila.
Now listen up a little.
This loose enough for you?
Only for her to highlight his prurience and make sport of him.
Yeah, that was nicely.
Yeah, he seems a little disappointed.
Okay. No fringe benefits for the boss?
Right.
Then so does she.
If you didn't carry such a chip on your shoulder, I would have given you a benefit or two.
Next day, they're navigating the river.
The village shouldn't be too far away, unless Reeves fooled us.
It's this silence, this total lack of human presence that bugs me.
She's about to learn there are far worse ways to get bugged.
Includa!
One of the guides becomes the unfortunate recipient of the first death modeled around the title. Mark does his best to conciliate Sheila.
What, son? Now look, you gotta put it out of your mind, understand? Just put it out of your mind.
But his alcoholic approach fails to wow her. This unlucky event puts them in deep peril.
I give us about 20 minutes before our first ass raping.
Well, one thing is for certain. We don't have a canoe anymore.
The pair take an impromptu siesta.
Sheila, get up, quick. Get up.
Leaving time for, gee, let me think.
The son of a bitch took off. Took just about everything with him. Machete, the flashlight, everything.
I would say this constitutes being up the proverbial shit creek without a paddle.
You know what? We're up Shit's Creek without a paddle.
See? The atmosphere and ambience turn creepy real fast.
What is it?
There are no more birds. Not even the bugs are buzzing anymore.
Come on, let's get out of here.
They soon come upon evidence not only of cannibalism, but recent cannibalism.
Come on.
Right before they discover the disposition of their treacherous guide. Nearby, two natives, perhaps a young couple, enjoy a quiet lunch. Before cannibals ambush the pair because they too want to have a quiet lunch. The girl is defiled and then served up buffet style. The abominable sight forces Mark to put a clamp on Sheila, lest her fright reveal their presence. They get going while the going's good, but after splitting for about 100 yards, Sheila's ready to pack it in.
We'll never live through this. We won't. And you know it.
Funny thing, things haven't even gotten bad yet. Mark didn't desert his unit in Vietnam and take up backroom arm wrestling to submit that easily. Probably the type of man who would rather crap his pants than tap out to a chokehold.
Get up and walk. Come on, get up and walk.
Sheila's optimism wouldn't fill a thimble.
When the cannibals attack, I want you to kill me.
I don't condone violence against women or anyone who hasn't gone out of their way to earn it.
I don't want to hear that again.
But there might be something to be said for knocking some sense into someone begging for a mercy kill when they're at fault for putting both in the situation.
Now, Mark, now. Maybe it's the last time.
She must have seen Debbie Does Dallas. Sure enough, the next day they are attacked by who they assume to be cannibals, but are natives associated with Jonas's cult and are accompanied by English speakers.
This will make you feel much better. Just relax.
Are you a doctor?
Because if you're a doctor, I indulged in a frivolous and quite libidinous sexual encounter last night with a dirty ruffian, and I might need a shot of penicillin to fend off gonorrhea.
Why'd you have to come here? If you don't believe in Jonas and purification, God help you.
In a roughshod place called Purification Village, Jonas comes to meet the interlopers.
Two new disciples are a pleasure to see arrive in our community, as long as your spirits are humble and sincere.
Seems more occultish than spiritual, putting the onus on them like that. But Jonas proves he has the public relations side of the equation down pat.
In this land, we have rediscovered the value of nature's sweet harmony, far from the forces of corruption and pollution.
Giving the same spiel that preceded him,
That are destroying the world some fool defined as civilized.
before telling them how it is.
You will not be permitted as of this moment to return home. You best understand that from the start.
Oh, but it's for their own good. Getting back is impossible because of those pesky cave-dwelling cannibals that are about. And, worse, have atrocious dining etiquette.
Their idea of lunch is fresh hot entrails soaked in blood.
Jonas lays down some religion.
In the words of the prophet Isaiah, the Lord has picked us to lead mankind out of his bondage.
Religious belief, fanaticism, used to demand total control and subservience? Checks out. Jonas shows them around, and the first stop? Jonas might not be the best at subtle threats.
Cobra venom is our only defense against our enemies.
Sure, it's easy to point at the cannibals as the danger, but cobra venom has no power to discern. Jonas reveals he knows they've come to see Diana and will be allowed to shortly. When the community's women return from a spiritual retreat prior to a funeral of a member who
took his life in most unfortunate circumstances.
Sheila is elated Diana is alive. So is Mark.
You owe me $80,000 in cash.
The funeral gets underway. And they set eyes on Diana for the first time.
She's different. I can hardly recognize her.
Mark draws his own conclusions.
She looks stoned out of her mind.
Naturally.
The widow must light the funeral pyre.
Why am I not surprised?
There's a ceremony that symbolically dissolves the sacred bonds of the widow with the dear departed.
And that's where this film gets even weirder, when it turns out to be a sex ritual.
Those three there are the brothers-in-law of the widow.
The widow, Mawara, is publicly stripped and laid out on a platform, so her amorous brother-in-laws can
canceling the bonds of kinship, they thus free her to marry again.
by banging her like nobody's business. Are we certain her husband did himself in? Is it possible those three had Mawara fever and arranged an accident and made it look self-inflicted? Mark can't help but be sardonic.
Nice. Keeps it in the family.
Following that supreme unpleasantness, under the auspices of Jonas, Sheila is finally reunited with Diana.
I can't believe it. It was like a nightmare. Thank God you're alive.
In front of her keeper, she robotically spouts his spiel. But the second he's out of earshot, she has another story.
He made us believe. But bit by bit his true nature came out. He's a fraud, a cruel sadist whose only desire is power.
Well, that's one obstacle overcome. If they had to deprogram her, that would be a whole other can of worms. But getting out still seems impossible.
Don't look at me, old Dick over there is watching us.
The natives entertain themselves with grotesque and barbaric cobra and mongoose battles, while Mark and the sisters hang around inconspicuously.
We gotta get out of this place, these people are crazy.
Back in New York, the police tell the professor they got Jonas dead to rights for ordering the 3 assassinations, if they could only find him. And furthermore, Sheila has vanished in New Guinea.
I have to remind you that there are still cannibals in the southeastern jungles of New Guinea.
Anything else to add?
What? Cannibals. Instead of buying frozen meat in a supermarket, they get theirs fresh from people like you.
If he was hoping to kick their asses into gear, it worked. Oh, a long-distance call is being placed.
I want to call New Guinea. No, this isn't Harry playing a joke. You better get your ass in gear, Sergeant.
With the proclamation,
We must expel all things foreign to God's nature. The spirits of evil.
Jonas calls everyone together for what could be a little self-deletion dry run, or the real thing, and everyone has no choice other than to participate if they know what's good for them.
Think, my children.
Mark was never one to judge what was best for him.
Don't drink this drug.
Jonas calls in his henchmen.
Colin.
One-on-one, it's no contest, but Mark's hopelessly outnumbered. And that means some dishonorable retaliation.
No! Stop it! Stop it! Leave him alone!
Before he's bound to a tree. His little stunt buys nothing, as everyone else drinks up. Jonas does some speechifying about the cannibals and civilization and how the day will come when it will be necessary to return to the Lord, as it were, right before a cannibal is dragged into camp and... Karen savagely executes him without a second thought. Soon thereafter, a compliant Sheila is further drugged so Jonas can prove he's nastier than the head of that cannibal will be when it's bursting with maggots. How does he accomplish this? By covering a big primitive-looking dildo with snake blood and using it to besmirch Sheila, painfully. Nothing gentlemanly about it, he really rams it home. Meanwhile, cruel Karen mocks our stalwart anti-hero with water.
You son of a bitch.
And proves he's not above thievery. which reveals his deficit of decency in a way easy to view as a harbinger of his future behavior. Dehydration a horribly painful thing, Diana offers him a swallow of relief.
Drink this, Mark.
But someone else will play a bigger role.
You are not like Jonas and the others. You must be free.
The kindly gent sends him off with a knife and well wishes, but the trials and tribulations continue. What's the death of one more man on blood-stained hands? Navigating the jungle, he comes into proximity of a cabal of cannibals condemning one of their own for crimes unknown, and feasting on available fauna. Oddball delicacies are one thing, but whether it's octopus, eels, or snakes, I decline to eat live things. Really, what's one more bloody hands? The eternal question, which is worse, a cobra or cannibals?
I was wrong. I want to join the community. I believe Jonas.
Did a bungled escape break Mark's resolve?
There's no way of escaping here alive, unless we trick Jonas.
Then you were faking Eddie.
Can an uncracked pistachio be broken into easily?
I realized from the start that we'd never be able to escape by land. Our only hope is the river.
Diana knows who to recruit.
There's Moira, the widow. She's a friend and a very sharp kid. She'd be glad to help us out.
But Mark needs to be obedient, and to buy some time, drink the proverbial Kool-Aid.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
A dry cult run by a teetotaler.
You'll be given provisions, a gun, and a copy of the good book.
An old man is exiled over booze.
No, Jonas. No. Oh, I'm an old man.
Falling under Jonas's control through drugging and persuasion, Sheila's will is flagging, and Mark has to pull her back from the brink with promise of escape.
Tomorrow night, they're having a purification ritual. When night falls, we're going.
Before the next night, an accusation is leveled against Mark.
Whiskey is my passion, but I haven't had a drop since I've been here.
Karen says he found the bottle under your bed.
And knowing what's on the line,
Go ahead, tell him, Jonas. Tell him he's a liar.
settles things in his inimitable style. Gaining Jonas's approval.
You have proven your good faith. The case is closed.
I'm pretty sure he's all religious hoodoo.
Don't forget what happened to Jehu and to Jezebel.
Of course.
As they went to bury her, all they found was a skull and remains of her hands and her feet.
What specific imagery to invoke? When it comes time to go, Sheila refuses and proclaims she belongs to Jonas. Mark has a surefire solution to this hiccup.
No! No!
Quick, get something for a hand.
Before long, their perfidy is discovered, and Jonas's henchmen, led by Karen, are dispatched to retrieve the wayward travelers. They foolishly gamble that Sheila has shaken enough of the brainwashing to be cool, but she sprints off screaming into the jungle. Mark goes after his $80,000. And Diana and Moira attempt to hide, only to run afoul of Karen and his goons. Letting out some pent-up hostility, morally compromised Karen takes the opportunity to use Diana's body to work out his frustrations, in the carnal sense, as she pleads with him to stop, and Moira watches on helplessly. Unbeknownst to all of them, cannibals are curious and closing in. Sheila eventually falls in a tiger trap, a hole at least, necessitating that Mark give her a hand.
Here we are. Are you okay? Are you hurt?
No.
And only then does she regain some of her senses.
Mark, what happened to me? I'm so confused. I can't remember anything.
They return for Diana and Moira to discover Karen beheaded and the women serving as the main course of a cannibal banquet. They flee, and after some acrobatics, With their best laid plan of escape unfurled, having withstood so much, Mark lays the facts bare.
We're not gonna get out of this. We need to go back to the village.
And it's bleak.
Or else we do it here and now.
With only two choices, Sheila decides for them.
Here now.
Only she wants one last thing.
Kiss me, Mark.
A fleeting instant. That buys them just enough time for the cavalry to arrive. With his fascist utopian community demolished, Jonas leads a mass self-deletion.
Come, drink it. Drink it with joy, brothers. Don't be afraid.
An entirely pointless act committed to indulge a madman's hubris.
Well, that's bad news.
Back in New York City, the grisly events that happened in New Guinea are a hot story.
The bodies of the 70 members of the purification sector are still being recovered.
The body of Mr. Jonas has yet to be found.
God help us!
The authorities have a request.
The commission would like you to omit everything regarding your encounter with the cannibals.
What? Why is that?
Mel Furr finishes out his day or two of filming by providing the answers.
Well, it's a touchy issue. And public opinion just can't handle it.
No matter how unsatisfying they prove to be.
Believe me, there are also political and economic reasons as well.
A man after my own heart, Mark has the perfect response.
Bye.
Spunkier than she's ever been, perhaps bolstered by the loss of her sister, Sheila has other ideas.
I'm going to tell the whole truth. I don't give a damn about your political or economic reasons.
During a heated discussion with the bank,
I understand. And you can go to hell.
Mark learns he was a real dupe.
You see your check here for 80,000 smackers. It bounced like a big rubber ball.
Evidently, oh gee, who could guess, there was never any money to pay for his services.
You don't have a penny to your name, sweetheart. Your sister, when she left from New York, turned all the money over to Jonas.
Having played him for a fool, she knows it too. Look at this snickering smirk.
You don't have very much good luck, do you, Mark? Now, who's going to pay for your expenses?
Sheila's unrepentant. Mark takes it in stride.
That's what I'd like to know.
Now I think he can figure out a thing or two she could do to work off the debt. I doubt Sheila would mind, at least for a while, being his personal high-priced courtesan.
Oh, Lord.
So, what's Eaten Alive getting at in its drag you to the ground to defile and eat you, well, alive kind of way? I have to assume this was a film with the kind of notorious repute that critics made a wide berth around it for fear of stepping in something mucky.
That is one big pile of shit.
Because there is a dearth of contemporary reviews. The Monthly Film Bulletin called it chaotic and concluded that it was brightened by occasional moments of unintended hilarity, but otherwise had nothing good to say about it.
All right, I understand.
This film isn't even, after time has softened the edges, looked upon more fondly.
That was a good one.
Online Film Database AllMovie rated Eaten Alive low and wrote, "There are Stone Age cannibals, a Jim Jones-style cult, hired assassins, and gratuitous animal slaughter thrown on screen every 5 minutes just to keep the viewer awake."
I don't have time for these shenanigans.
I would call that last part spurious because the film is quite bracing, but everyone is entitled to their opinion. Furthermore, they stated, at least there is some sense of warped justice here, as hard as one may have to dig to find it. Both of the leading characters are given a backstory of having exploited blacks in their Alabama cotton mill, only to lose their ill-gotten money and, in one case, pay the ultimate price, as one underclass avenges another half a world away.
There is something fishy about this whole thing, you know that? I don't like any of it.
I would like to agree with Mark, but many of these criticisms are fair. Anything with real animal deaths is not only distasteful, but immoral, and should be criminal everywhere. Putting such real elements in what's merely an entertainment opens the floodgates to negative criticism and makes the film nearly indefensible. I personally feel like whatever shock factor is earned wasn't worth the credibility lost, because a lot of the cannibal films had strong enough storylines to not include such stomach-churning and heartbreaking material.
Is this any time for wisecracks?
By including it, they at best attempt to make a clumsy comment about exploitation, but fail, because having the temerity and audacity to take exploitation to the nth degree, to expose exploitation, doesn't wash, and only exposes how those involved in the exploitation industry can be morally and ethically compromised. At least a lot of the animal footage was recycled through multiple films.
It's over. What happened is finished.
I wonder if it was worth losing the power of the more trenchant points these films made in exchange for infamy and a few extra bucks. But I guess when you're a working exploitation filmmaker, you're only thinking about what shock value will bring the most immediate profits and not the historical ramifications of including it. But does that mean it loses all social value?
I've seen some pretty bad things in my life.
I argue no. Even if the film does exist on some level as pure exploitation, as a piece of media, it also exists beyond the confines of those who made it, and their motives for doing so, because the audience it exists for has the ultimate say, and from that standpoint, I see quite a bit in this film, even though most, if not all of it, is likely inadvertent.
Very, very spooky.
Don't get me wrong, when all was said and done, the film is little more than an unholy mashup of elements with the intent to put corrupt white people deep in the jungle with ignorant but dangerous natives, some of which were inclined to make centerpieces of human skulls and finger sandwiches out of fingers. Much of this film revolves around Sheila's journey, a rich girl surviving on family wealth, a dutiful little sister, and a persistent woman on a mission. She's a more nuanced character than you might take her for at first blush, able to negotiate a paradoxical life that at once leaves her too pampered to handle the harder truths, but also forces her into untenable situations that require her to have more resolve and backbone than even she thought she could summon. She beats the odds to survive everything.
It's like I'm falling in a bottomless pit.
Was her motive truly love for Diana, or hope of reclaiming some of her daddy's wealth? I would split that one down the middle. On some level, she had to know the money was irretrievable, so if it took greed to empower nobler intentions, the more power to her, because the cannibal-infested jungle was far closer to hell than I hoped to ever get, and going there for any reason calls her sanity into question.
Ah, you scatterbrain of a little sister. You must be insane taking the risks you did.
See? Diana bemoans her mistakes and regrets that they involved her little sister. But when considering that Sheila showing up got her tossed off the mortal coil in one of the most brutal fashions imaginable, failing to leave a structured stipend and a note not to pursue her were her biggest mistakes beyond getting involved with Jonas in the first place.
You understand?
Was it because she blew money earned off the backs of black laborers that she had to die, eaten alive by cannibals the way they were eaten alive by sore muscles, blisters, and unending hours for wages barely enough to keep their stomachs fed?
Oh my God, I've been such a fool.
This may be a stretch, but when you consider the religious devotion of Southern blacks, Jonas besmirching religion and creating a situation of modern slavery could be considered particularly offensive to them. Any notions of being deserving are relative, though.
The price that I'm paying for having fallen for Jonas in New York is glorious laws of purification.
Because if any of that is at play, Mawara is nothing more than collateral damage punished for proximity, for making the mistake of aligning with Diana, I suppose. The whole Alabama cotton mill backstory grants a racial undercurrent that stretches all the way back to American slavery, and offers an image by which to judge Jonas's Purification Village. By expecting total subservience, was he demanding anything less than slavery of his followers, both civilized and native? As for Sheila, is her casual racism a true reflection of her feelings, or is she cashing in on her southern plantation heritage to sell the illusion of wealth?
And I always end up giving in.
Undoubtedly, she was raised with certain biases, but her interactions with the lower classes, such as a scurvy dog like Mark, don't reveal any deep disdain or contempt for those below her on the social ladder, so she's not a hateful person despite carrying some perhaps generational prejudice.
I can hardly recognize myself.
Generational trauma, the sins of the father and forefathers, extend into the newer branches of the family tree and may come straight from the roots, but that doesn't mean every leaf needs to be the same patina of green.
Yep, that stands up to scrutiny.
Not a lot of latitude or even agency in her life. She exists in a gilded cage and winds up being the perfect reflection of a little sister, condemned to follow big sis Diana's footsteps, which was maybe not the best thing, since her bringing Mark into Jonas's orbit was a catalyst that sparked chaos in what was already a nest of chaos.
I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse.
Mark is a total free thinker who lives his truth no matter who it offends. A man who witnessed atrocities.
Decapitated women. Burned babies. Old men's eyes burned out with gas.
And said no more, tucking himself away in a faraway land to hide from the fallout of his desertion, but unapologetic for doing it. Not so much a soldier of fortune or even a gun for hire, he's an opportunist with a set of skills that make him capable enough.
But the important thing is to remain cool.
An inveterate loner, he looks to no source outside his personal motives to drive his actions, which seems to mostly be staying alive and making enough whiskey money for life. I like to think had he known Sheila was broke, abandoning her wouldn't have been an option, but come on.
That doesn't matter.
It's easy to guess that for him, organized religion, as in going into church to sit through a sermon, would be outside his comfort zone because he refuses to hand his autonomy over to a greater power. A cult represents control magnitudes worse, and was therefore automatically anathema for a man so set in his lone wolf path. So it's no wonder the insertion of him into the cult's environment was like putting a white polyurethane cloth over a hornet to lead death and destruction to the hive.
I don't care.
He's no more brutal than a given situation warrants, but there's no cap to the brutality he's willing to inflict. Riding that dichotomous line between good and bad, no matter what, whether he's acting as devil or saint, he stands as a monument to whatever the hell he wants. A cynical guy who will slap a woman to straighten her out, kill a man at the first provocation, and play good guy only for the promise of a shit ton of money, he fits the bill for an anti-hero. But I don't know if he was even that, or just a broken down veteran self-medicating with alcohol who only valued his own life when someone else was trying to take it. And don't dare try to deprive him of his freedom. Perhaps Jonas's grandest folly behind recruiting Diana.
We have been betrayed, Elijah. I will requite you in this very field. Jehovah's oracle came to pass.
Jonas was a leader closed to all criticism. He cared nothing for the judgments of outsiders, who at the first sign of dissent he quickly painted as interlopers, or those closest to him, who he as quickly smeared as traitors. He turned out to be every bit as evil, cruel, and contemptible as implied. And much like the cult leader he was in some ways modeled after, exists as a swipe against the cults riding Christianity's coattails, but in general also a warning against such bastardizations of accepted institutions. Organized religion has enough problems without throwing in a bunch of weird offshoots with self-proclaimed prophets preaching their own dogma, usually based on gross misinterpretations and therefore misrepresentations of Scripture.
The dogs devour Jehu's flesh.
Since many alternative religions or cults prove dangerous, I think it's fair to point out the possibility even if it's not necessarily the case in every instance. Sure, most don't end with mass group self-deletion, but many consume and destroy the lives of those who fall prey to them, often draining their finances while demanding an ever-increasing allegiance and submission of will. Sadly, some do turn out truly detestable, such as the Anthill Kids, founded by Roctario, which existed very similarly to Jonas's Purification Village at the very time the film was made, minus the natives and encroaching cannibals. Due to the inherent possibility of danger, should cults be outright stopped? I believe in freedom, and part of that is religious freedom, which unfortunately means not intervening when people are hellbent on screwing up their lives by believing the ravings of a wackadoodle. But the second these off-brand groups start breaking the law, they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. Also, to what end? Where would the line be drawn between another denomination and a cult? Seems a slippery slope primed for exploiting, so better to avoid.
It's just a matter of hours now.
Eaten Alive seems to offer insight into those most likely to get recruited into cults, revealing they are highly damaged, disillusioned, and or easily influenced people willing to do anything to feel better and or improve their circumstances. Those seeking to fill holes representing lack of fulfillment in their lives will always gravitate to cults because their quote-unquote hallowed leaders swear up and down, usually quite charismatically, that they won't only provide said fulfillment, but supply moral and spiritual fortitude and all the pertinent answers to life.
No splat.
The cost? Relinquishment of mind, heart, and soul, agency and autonomy, freedom of will, thought, and action. Basically everything that makes someone a whole individual. A film like this could be accused of using an insidious cult as a device torn from the headlines to cash in rather than a source of truth meant to convey a serious comment on the ravenous nature of such factions. But no matter what, merely by depicting this sort of cult in many ways truthfully, no matter its intent, it lives up to being a keen insight into what your life could be like if you find yourself subsumed into such a group, and it's far from pretty.
That's not good enough.
Oftentimes cult leaders are charming blowhards, and that lends to an innate persuasiveness on their part, the sort of enticing air about them to which the weaker-willed flock like seagulls to garbage scows. And Jonas fits right in that mold. The fealty and dedication he expects is tantamount to handing over one's entire existence, and he has no problem condemning those who dare stray. If Jonas expected you to bend over backwards, you better be willing to break your spine. Don't worry though, he'll heal you by debasing you with a weird sex toy doused in some poor animal's corpuscles. No matter the ramifications, his word is gospel, and decides that which exists in defiance of his conception of God. He passes final judgment, supposedly based on his decidedly narrow reading of Scripture. But was it even that, or just to serve his personal beliefs, desires, and power? Something about how he treats everyone, but women in particular, suggests he's a disturbed and deranged fetishist right up there with the Marquis de Sade, beholden to dark, perverse, and twisted desires far greater than any religious devotion. The sort of paraphilias that force a man to form a cult to get his rocks off. Like all cult leaders, he's a power-hungry narcissist with a major case of main character syndrome. So that in itself makes it a lot easier to conclude all of it. His whole spiel and belief system acted mostly as a springboard to fulfill his hunger for power, passion for allegiance, and desire for absolute control. And he didn't really care about any of it beyond how it fulfilled his needs and wants.
Show up with their forces and threaten to crush our paradise. Then that day,
in some ways he was right on the money.
we would have to face the supreme decision to embrace the Almighty, to choose glory.
It was inevitable it would end how it did, because eventually his power was going to be called into question, and that's when an egotist who has reached the pinnacle of control needs to leap off that tower, no matter how high it is, and take everyone he can with him. And that results in all going splat, except maybe for Jonas himself, who did likely abscond, while those he buffaloed paid the ultimate price. I would go so far as to say his final craven act was a means of eliminating witnesses, so his escape would be that much cleaner of a break. Although there's nothing clean about what he did. Karen, as Jonas's right-hand man, reflects the leader's darker nature. Even though he wasn't there for it and probably wouldn't approve, Diana was sacrificed on the altar of Jonas. The morals at the top roll down the hill, so Karen's foul, stupid, and cowardly act in many ways reveals perhaps Jonas's id, and shows my suppositions aren't off base.
Right, you're talking in circles.
The film depicts mongooses pitted against cobras for the entertainment of natives, which works as a perfect analogy for the conflicting natures that were Mark and Jonas, pitted against each other for our entertainment, with Mark in the role of wily mongoose, and Jonas in the role of cunning Cobra. Polar opposites with a few common traits, it's in their commonalities that their enmity emerged, since both know the other will never capitulate. I suspect it was only because Jonas believed the jungle whipped the dissent out of him that he chose to believe Mark would actually integrate into the village, or sheer arrogance. Either way, it was another mistake that proves how not divine or worthy of idolatry Jonas really was. So far was he down the rabbit hole of his own BS, he was no longer objective enough to discern a true threat. In the end, mongooses feed on cobras, so not as fair of a fight as you might think. Mark was a one-man wrecking machine, and Jonas needed a small army to carry out his bidding. Only when all hope was lost did Mark consider cashing it in, but Jonas preached about the eventuality as to be expected, and when adversity came, used his great sway to commit mass murder with but in order. Were the helicopters arriving a deus ex machina? Since the possibility of outside pressure was set up throughout the film, I only consider the timing a little too perfect, used to milk the most drama from the situation. But otherwise, the film didn't pull punches. And even if Mark had sent Sheila to the angels, and then found his own way to the clearing at the end of the path, he would have won, because it would have been on his terms. A Pyrrhic victory to be sure, but in that case, something has to be squeezed out of that turnip.
Of course I'm gonna take you away from here. You think I want to give up my $80,000?
The film may also be making a point about how no good deed goes unpunished. Even for an exorbitant fee, it was charitable of Mark to take Sheila into that jungle when he described their very first stop like this.
The place has yellow fever and it's swarming with cobras.
Indicating it would only get worse from there. Whether Sheila harbored quixotic hopes of getting back the money she's entitled to, or genuinely was only concerned with Diana's well-being, love for her sister was a motivating factor, and it led to Big Sis being given hope that would be dashed when she ended up Karen's plaything and on the cannibal's menu. Had Sheila never come, her bondage would have been ongoing, but also her life. Weighing the best results is hard in that one, but going out that way was nothing short of horrific.
Just leave me in peace.
Diana felt signing their assets over to Jonas was the right thing to do. Well, you know how that worked out. As for Jonas, if there was ever any truth to his whole preserve nature and live as one with the environment,
a sort of primitive ecological union or reunion.
What might have begun as kindness, freeing people from the shackles of a corrupt, befouled civilization, warped him into a power-mad fiend, willing to see everyone dead if he couldn't keep getting his way. For a supposed spiritual leader, a godly man, that was kind of a big failing.
Stop it!
I've about reached the end of the rope, so I won't keep you dangling. Thanks for humoring my ramblings. Please share any refutations, opinions, accusations, japes, or other ideas in the comments below. And please check out whatever I'm up to next time. Bye now!
Bye, creepy man! Keep it creepy!
He's a weird guy.
By the way, that $80,000 includes taxes.